The air in Derry, Maine, hung heavy, not with the expected salty Atlantic breeze, but with a strange smell of damp metal and something sweet, almost nauseating, which Velma Dinkley detected with a thoughtful grimace, wrinkling her delicate nose with a touch of revulsion. The afternoon sun, filtered by dense, heavy clouds that seemed to embrace the sky in a somber hug, barely managed to dissipate the deep shadows that danced through the narrow alleys and the gloomy Victorian houses, many with sagging roofs and broken windows that looked like empty eyes, staring at them as they passed. An oppressive silence hung over the town, a silence that was not of peace, but of something contained, almost suffocating, as if the town itself was holding its breath. It was interrupted only by the distant hiss of tires on the asphalt, wet from the fine drizzle that had fallen earlier, and by the occasional creak of a tree branch swaying in the cold wind, like a skeleton dancing a macabre waltz. Scooby-Doo, nestled between Shaggy's legs in the back seat of the Mystery Machine, let out a low, restless whimper, his fur bristling slightly, a sign that something wasn't right. He sniffed the air with an anxious nose, as if detecting a ghostly hamburger lurking, or perhaps something far more sinister, something that awakened a primal fear in his canine instinct. "Ah, Shaggy," Fred Jones began, his eyes fixed on the winding road that seemed to stretch endlessly. His voice, normally full of confidence and enthusiasm for a new trap, was laden with an unusual apprehension rarely heard from the fearless leader. "I don't know about you guys, but this place gives me the creeps." Not even Fred's diner snacks seemed capable of dispelling this strange atmosphere. And mind you, I'm an inveterate fan of a good peanut butter, banana, and hot sauce sandwich. Shaggy Rogers, who was munching on a pack of Scooby snacks with an enthusiasm that barely disguised his own nervousness. The crunchy sound was the only thing keeping him from screaming and running away, choked, almost swallowing the entire biscuit at once. Creeps? Fred, I'm starting to break out in a cold sweat just thinking about what awaits us. This place looks like it came out of one of those horror movies Velma loves to watch alone, but which I can never finish. The kind where you have to cover your eyes and peek through your fingers just to make sure the monster doesn't jump off the screen. He gesticulated awkwardly with a Scooby snack, which narrowly missed Daphne Blake in the passenger seat, who was focused on reapplying her makeup, oblivious to the mess. Daphne, in turn, tried to compose herself, adjusting her perfectly matching purple bandana and wiping off some smudged lipstick. "Don't be silly, Shaggy. We came here to help find the missing children. It's serious work, and someone has to keep calm and dignified, even if the place is a little scary." But even her voice sounded a little more tense than usual, and her blue eyes, normally so serene, examined with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension the dark houses that passed by the window, each one seeming to hide a dark secret. She noticed a rusty child swing set in an abandoned yard, swaying gently in the wind with a melancholic creak, as if an invisible ghost were still playing there. Velma, engrossed in her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen at an impressive speed, barely seemed to notice the conversation. "It's more serious than you imagine. The reports speak of a pattern. Mass disappearances every 27 years, always with a strange connection to the city's sewer system. And the witnesses. The descriptions are inconsistent, but all mention red balloons and a sweet smell, almost like spoiled cotton candy, before the children vanished into thin air without a trace." She paused dramatically, finally looking up from her device and pushing her glasses up her nose, revealing a serious and thoughtful gaze. "This isn't a common mystery, guys. It seems we're dealing with something timeless. Something that hides in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge and fear, like a parasite that feeds on negative energy." A chill ran down Shaggy and Scooby's spines, who hugged each other tightly, trembling like leaves in an autumn storm. The dog, sensing the heavy atmosphere, crawled even further under the seat, his round eyes peeking out in dread, as if expecting something to jump out of the darkness at any moment to get them. Suddenly, a small, solitary red balloon floated slowly upwards, coming from a rusty manhole cover at the edge of the street, right in front of the mystery machine, almost blocking the way. It was a vibrant red, almost defiant, and seemed to vibrate with an energy of its own, swaying slowly in the air for an instant, seeming to observe them, before being carried away by the wind and quickly disappearing among the skeletal trees and tall buildings, as if it had never existed. The silence returned, but now it was filled with a growing sense of dread, a dark and palpable anticipation. What awaited Mystery Inc. in the damp, dark labyrinths of Derry? And more importantly, what did that red balloon mean? So innocent in its vibrant color and yet so menacing in its sudden appearance. The mystery of Derry was just beginning to unfold its dark depths, and the gang knew this would be one of their most terrifying and challenging adventures yet. The mystery machine purred down Main Street in Derry, its tires gliding smoothly over the damp, uneven asphalt, speckled with puddles from the earlier drizzle and dry leaves that crunched under the tires. The air, heavy and cold, carried a strange smell of wet earth, moss, a hint of sulfur, and, occasionally, an almost imperceptible metallic odor, like rusty blood mixed with mold. Scooby-Doo, sitting in the back seat next to Shaggy, kept his ears down and a worried expression, his large brown eyes scanning the landscape with canine apprehension, sniffing the air with his restless snout. He occasionally sniffed the air, making sounds of dissatisfaction that only Shaggy seemed to understand. "What's up, Scooby?" Shaggy asked, trying a casual tone, but his voice was choked with nervousness, and he squeezed a pack of Scooby snacks so hard the biscuits were almost turning to dust. "You're quieter than a ghost in a library on a silent day. Where's my Scooby-Doo who loves snacks and runs from a monster with a raro? Scream while I follow him yelling zoinks." Better than Van Galen just whimpered, pointing his snout towards the horizon, where the sky met a line of dark trees. The heavy clouds gave the town a desolate appearance, and the treetops, denuded by the approaching autumn, looked like skeletal fingers pointing at the gray sky, as if warning of something sinister and imminent. Fred, at the wheel, adjusted the rearview mirror, observing Velma and Daphne's apprehensive expressions in the front seat. His lips were tense. "I know, guys. This place is different. The silence is almost deafening, and the lack of people on the streets is scarier than a chorus of ghosts. But we can't let that scare us. We have a job to do, and the children of Derry need us and all our detective skills." He attempted an encouraging smile, but his eyes, normally so focused on traps and brilliant plans, seemed a little more distant, observing the old, silent houses that lined the streets. Many of them had for sale signs or were visibly abandoned, with broken windows, collapsed roofs, and gardens overgrown with weeds that looked like skeletal claws rising from the ground. The town seemed to have been emptied, not by a holiday or event, but by something more sinister, an invisible force that drove its inhabitants away, leaving only the echo of their former lives. The sound of a crow cawing in a nearby tree made Scooby jump in his seat, hitting his head on the van's ceiling with a dull thud, which elicited a startled "Raro" from him. "Jinkies!" exclaimed Velma, engrossed in her tablet, her agile fingers gliding across the screen in a frantic search for information. The data is even more disturbing here. Reports of child disappearances date back centuries, and there's always a 27-year interval between peaks. The last victims disappeared exactly 27 years ago, to the day and month, almost to the hour. She looked up, her glasses sliding down her nose a bit, revealing a glimmer of concern rarely seen in her intelligent, perceptive eyes. "This is no coincidence, guys. There's a very clear pattern. And something tells me it's not a villain in a rubber mask, as usual. It seems to be something more fundamental, something that transcends human logic. She turned the tablet towards them, showing graphs and dates that repeated chillingly. Daphne, who was rummaging in her purse, looking for a lip gloss to try and ease the tension, froze upon hearing Velma's words, her hand stopping midway. Seriously, Velma? It can't be. There must be a logical explanation, as always. Maybe it's a group of scary pranksters who like to play horrible tricks in cycles of almost 3 decades. She tried to sound convincing, but her wide eyes betrayed her apprehension, and she gripped her purse strap tightly, as if wanting to crush it. Fred shook his head, his expression serious and determined. Not with that kind of frequency and with the lack of traces. If it's someone, they're very good at covering their tracks, and the way the children disappear is almost as if they evaporate. That's why we're here, to find the traces no one else has found and unravel what's behind these inexplicable disappearances. He turned a corner, and the mystery machine stopped in front of a decrepit Victorian house, which seemed to have been swallowed by poison ivy and forgotten by time and sunlight. A rusty sign hung precariously on the porch with almost faded letters. Private Detective Agency, Derry. It seemed the former occupant had fled in a hurry, leaving everything behind, including some piles of old, dusty newspapers at the door. "All right, team," Fred announced, turning off the engine, and the silence outside became even deeper. It was almost palpable, broken only by the distant chirping of a cricket and the rustling of dry leaves dancing on the ground. "We'll set up our base here. Shaggy and Scooby, please try not to eat all the emergency supplies before we figure out what's going on and who's behind it." "No problem, Fred," Shaggy said, thumping his chest, but his voice sounded a little high-pitched and he hopped as if on springs. "Because if we have to investigate a hungry monster, it's better to be prepared, right, Scooby? An empty stomach is a scared stomach, and a scared stomach doesn't eat much." Scooby agreed with a hesitant nod, his eyes fixed on a shadow that seemed to move in the window of the house next door, a black cat with bright green eyes that peered with curious intensity before vanishing into the darkness. As they unloaded their equipment, high-powered flashlights, evidence collection kits, a smoke machine for special effects, and even a small aerial reconnaissance drone, the air suddenly grew colder, and a strange aroma, almost sweet, like spoiled cotton candy mixed with something metallic and a hint of sulfur, invaded their nostrils, making them wrinkle their faces. Scooby began to bark softly, his fur standing on end, and he cowered against Shaggy, who seemed to be a step away from full panic. Shaggy looked around nervously, his eyes searching for the source of the smell. "What was that, Scooby? Did you smell it? It's like someone left candy in the trash for 100 years, and now it's coming back to haunt us." "Oh," Scooby murmured, pointing a trembling paw at the manhole on the sidewalk, a few feet from them, from where the smell seemed to emanate most strongly. From there, floating lazily out of the rusty metal, emerged a red balloon. It was a vibrant red, almost defiant, and seemed to vibrate with an energy of its own, swaying slowly in the air for an instant, seeming to observe them with a sinister intelligence before being carried away by the wind and quickly disappearing among the skeletal trees and tall buildings, as if it had never existed, leaving only the smell and the feeling that it had been a warning. Velma, who was organizing some piles of books on unexplained phenomena and local folklore, let a thick volume on the psychology of fear fall with a dull thud, making her jump. "A red balloon," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the spot where the balloon had disappeared, a wrinkle of concern forming on her forehead as she tried to process the information. "Exactly as in the descriptions, it's a sign. But of what? And why always a balloon? This isn't just a whim." Fred, who was closing the mystery machine's door with a click, frowned, his gaze serious and worried. "I don't know, Velma, but whatever it is, it seems to be inviting us to a party, and it doesn't look like a fun party. More like a nightmare party, and we're the guests of honor." He looked at Shaggy and Scooby, who were huddled together, their eyes wide with dread. "I think our first step is to investigate these manholes, but with extreme caution. Something tells me that whatever is causing these disappearances is watching our every move. And it's not happy with our presence, not at all." Fred's voice contained a serious tone, something rarely heard, and the silence that followed was filled only by the rustling of dry leaves on the ground and the accelerated beating of the group's hearts. The mystery of Derry had revealed itself, and it seemed scarier than any of them could have imagined, with a silent and sinister invitation coming from the depths of the city, calling them into the unknown. The smell of mold, sewage, and a strange sweetness was almost unbearable as the Mystery Inc. gang ventured into Derry's subterranean labyrinth. Dampness trickled down the walls, forming small streams that snaked across the floor, and the constant sound of dripping created a macabre and disturbing symphony, amplified by the tunnel's echo. Fred led the way, his powerful flashlight cutting through the damp darkness, revealing walls covered in slippery slime and gigantic cobwebs that looked like gruesome curtains, swaying gently with the air. "Stay together, everyone. Visibility is almost zero down here, and the floor is slippery as soap. One false step and we could end up somewhere we wouldn't want to be," he warned, his voice echoing strangely through the tunnels, making it sound deeper and more urgent. Velma, with a map of the sewers in one hand, an old, dusty map she had found at the detective agency, with notes in faded ink, and a small flashlight in the other, tried to decipher the city's ancient blueprints, which seemed to have been drawn by someone who didn't want them understood, full of mysterious branches. According to these old schematics, there's a deactivated pumping chamber about 50 meters from here. It could be a hideout, or perhaps the origin point of all this, a center of operations. Shaggy and Scooby, inevitably, were the most apprehensive. Shaggy tripped over an exposed root protruding from the ground, letting out a muffled yelp that echoed off the walls and fell on top of Scooby. "Zoinks! This place is horrible. It's like my great-uncle's room after a week without cleaning, only with more water, less smell of dirty socks, and more slippery things." Scooby, by his side, let out a nervous bark, his eyes wide as he watched the shadows dance on the damp walls, each shadow seeming to transform into a monster about to jump on them. A fat, furry rat with red eyes scurried past their feet, making them jump and hug each other in a tangle of arms and legs, almost knocking themselves into the dirty water. "Calm down, guys. It's just a rat, and it's more scared than you are. Probably looking for a way out of this labyrinth," Daphne said, trying to maintain her composure, although her own shoulders were tense and she felt a chill run down her spine with every noise. She was more at ease than the boys, but the claustrophobic environment and the constant dripping sound made her a little tense, and she felt the dampness penetrate her clothes. She wore a pair of rubber gloves and a smaller flashlight, occasionally illuminating strange marks on the ground. "Look, there's something here." She pointed her light at a dark stain on the wall, almost imperceptible in the gloom, a strange contrast to the slime. "It looks like dried mud, but with a strange, almost metallic sheen and an iridescent glow." Velma approached, examining the stain with a magnifying glass she had pulled from her skirt pocket, her eyes fixed on the surface. "Interesting. It's not common mud. It has mineral residues that are not native to here, and the composition is peculiar, almost synthetic. And what is this?" She brushed her finger across the surface and held it up, revealing a tiny, shimmering, almost translucent fragment which seemed to pulse faintly. "It looks like a piece of balloon, but it's not common plastic. It's a strange material, almost organic, but with an elastic texture and a slight iridescence like that of a soap bubble." She placed the fragment in a small evidence bag, sealing it carefully. Fred, meanwhile, was inspecting one of the main pipes, which appeared to be made of old cast iron and was covered in rust. This pipe seems to have been forced, as if something large and heavy had passed through here recently, perhaps even dragged itself. He pointed to deep scratches and unusual wear marks on the metal surface, which seemed fresh. It's not something a plumber would do. It's rough, almost as if something dragged itself through here with great force, leaving claw marks or marks from something very heavy. Daphne, with a surprising knack for details the others often missed, observed a pattern of dark stains on the wall that seemed to repeat at regular intervals. "Fred, look here. These marks? They're like a kind of trail. It's almost as if something was dragging itself, leaving an oily, dark substance." She ran her finger over one of the stains and sniffed it, grimacing, stepping back. It's a sweet but nauseating smell, like that smell we felt on the street, only much stronger and more concentrated down here. It smells like rotten cotton candy or decaying fruit with a metallic hint. A sweet but repulsive trail, and with fragments of a strange balloon. Velma summarized, meticulously writing in her notebook, her glasses reflecting the flashlight's light. This fits perfectly with the witness descriptions. Many mentioned a strange smell before the disappearances, and the presence of red balloons. This is not the work of a common human or an animal. It's something orchestrated. She stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor, her expression growing even graver and more worried. "And look at this." Velma pointed to a small pile of old, dirty children's toys, piled in a damp corner, as if they had been hastily abandoned, covered by a thin layer of sludge. A rusty, wheel-less toy car, a rag doll with one eye missing and tangled hair, and a small paper boat, soaked and dissolved, with faded colors, almost unrecognizable. "Zoinks!" Shaggy exclaimed, feeling a shiver down his spine that made him tremble uncontrollably. "The missing children's toys. This is too scary, Fred. Scarier than a 3D horror movie." Scooby let out a low whimper, sniffing a small brown teddy bear that lay beside it, with one ear torn and dirty, as if it were crying. Fred thought for a moment, his expression serious and worried, his brow furrowed. "This means we're on the right track. This place is a nest, or at least a collection point. But what are we looking for? A kidnapper who collects toys and uses a strange smell to spread fear? Or something more sinister? Something we can't simply unmask, but that might be a real entity." "I have a theory," Velma said, adjusting her glasses and looking at the group, her voice taking on a tone of deep reflection. "If the disappearances occur every 27 years, and there's a pattern in the balloon material and the trails, maybe it's not a common human, or at least not one acting alone. Perhaps it's something that feeds on the city's energy, its history, and manifests in a way that causes fear, like these balloons and the appearance of a clown, as some witnesses said. An entity that materializes through terror, gaining strength with each cycle." Suddenly, a soft noise, almost a murmur, echoed from one of the darker, deeper pipes ahead of them. It was a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, like a distorted, childlike laugh, almost a whisper that turned into a low growl, chilling their blood. Scooby and Shaggy recoiled, their fur standing on end, their eyes wide, frantically searching for the source of the sound. What was that? Shaggy whispered, his voice almost inaudible, trembling so much his teeth chattered. Before anyone could answer, a small, solitary red balloon, even more vibrant than the first one they saw on the street, floated slowly out of a dark pipe ahead. It spun in the air, almost as if dancing a macabre waltz, and suddenly, from inside the balloon, a sharp sound emanated, almost an electronic hiss, followed by a low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from all directions, filling the tunnel with a terrifying and penetrating sound. Fred's flashlight flickered for an instant, plunging the tunnel into momentary darkness, and when the light returned, the balloon was gone, as if it had dematerialized into the air, leaving only the echo of the laugh. Fred swallowed hard, feeling a chill run down his spine. His eyes were tense, but he tried to remain calm for the rest of the group. "Well, guys, it looks like we're not alone down here. And whatever is here, it knows we're here. And I have a strange feeling it's not happy with our visit. It seems to be inviting us to a game, and we are the pawns on its macabre board." The tension in the air was palpable, an almost physical weight that suffocated them, and the promise of an imminent confrontation hung over them, making the damp, dark silence even more terrifying, with the certainty that something evil was watching them from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. As Mystery Inc. advanced through the sewers, the atmosphere became increasingly oppressive, dense, and claustrophobic. The walls seemed to close in on them. The ceiling lowered in some places, and the sweet, nauseating smell intensified with each step, making breathing difficult, almost suffocating, as if they were trapped in a gas chamber. The air was thick, heavy, and the sound of their own footsteps echoed disturbingly, mixing with the incessant dripping of water. Fred tried to maintain control, his eyes scanning the darkness with his flashlight, but with each step, the feeling of being watched grew, as if invisible eyes followed them from every damp, dark corner or peered from behind the rusty pipes. "Velma, are you sure this is the right way to the pumping chamber? This tunnel seems endless, and I'm starting to think we're going in circles, or that it's leading us into a trap," he asked, his voice containing a hint of frustration and growing concern. Velma, consulting her aged and dusty map, grumbled, running her finger over the faded lines and obscure markings. "By my calculations, yes. But it seems Derry's sewer system is much more complex than the maps indicate. There are unmapped branches, as if they were added or modified over time, perhaps to hide something very important." She suddenly stopped, pointing her flashlight at an unusual crack in an old brick wall, which seemed to have been crudely patched with new and old cement, creating a strange scar. "And this construction, it doesn't seem to be from the same era as the rest. It's almost as if something was built around a pre-existing structure, something much older and more primitive." Daphne, who was more attentive to visual details, frowned, her eyes sharp as her flashlight beam swept the surfaces. "Look at these marks on the brick walls, guys. They're not ordinary scratches. They single quotes claw marks. And some seem to have been made by something very large and strong, with sharp points and brutal force." She pointed to deep grooves that appeared to have been made by something dragging itself forcefully, leaving irregular marks on the stone and cement. Suddenly, Scooby and Shaggy, who were a little behind the group, with Shaggy clinging to Scooby's collar as if his life depended on it, began to bark and whimper hysterically, pointing to a darker area of the tunnel, where the flashlight's light barely reached and shadows danced more intensely. "Zoinks, Scooby! I swear I saw something. It looked like a balloon. And then it vanished, but it was looking at me." Shaggy shrieked, his eyes wide with terror, and he cowered even further, almost curling into a ball. Fred and Velma quickly turned, pointing their powerful flashlights at the indicated spot. There was nothing, just the damp darkness and the sound of dripping. "Shaggy, Scooby, you have to focus. We can't afford false scares here. Every movement and every sound can be crucial to our safety," Fred said, though his voice was a little softer, recognizing the genuine terror in his furry, scrawny friend's eyes. "But I swear, Fred, and it had an eye. A bright yellow eye, looking at me, and it was laughing. It was a creepy smile." Shaggy insisted, hugging Scooby even tighter, as if the dog were an impenetrable shield. Velma, however, didn't ignore them. She thought for a moment, her eyes gleaming with new understanding, and she made a note on her tablet. Shaggy might have seen something. Witnesses spoke of visions and apparitions, and Pennywise, the clown, is known to appear in terrifying ways to his victims, using their greatest fears against them. He distorts reality. She made a note in her notebook, her fingers flying across the page. This only confirms my theory that we're dealing with something that feeds on fear. And the best way to feed on fear is through illusions, through nightmares that become real and palpable. As they discussed, a dripping sound intensified, coming from a rusty pipe above them. It was a constant rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, but a sick, monstrous heart. Daphne, looking up, noticed something slowly falling from the pipe. It was a viscous liquid, a dark reddish hue, almost like dried blood, which spread on the damp ground, forming a small bubbling puddle. "Oh my God! What is that?" she asked, her voice choked, feeling a shiver down her spine that made her tremble. "Don't touch it," Velma warned, but it was already too late. Scooby, curious and somewhat distracted by the strange smell, which resembled a mix of cherry and cleaning product, had licked a drop that fell near him. His eyes widened and he began to whimper, spinning in circles, as if dizzy and disoriented. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at Shaggy with wide, bloodshot eyes, and a bizarre, guttural laugh escaped his mouth, completely different from his usual barks. The sound was disturbing, almost demented, and made Shaggy jump back, startled. "Scooby, stop it! You're really scaring me. That's not you," Shaggy yelled, backing away, his eyes fixed on his friend's strange behavior, who continued to laugh macabrely. Velma analyzed the liquid on the ground, taking a small sample with a dropper. "It's a chemical substance. It seems to have mild hallucinogenic properties. It must have leaked from some old factory and is reacting with something in the sewers, creating gases or particles that affect the mind, causing hallucinations and distorting the perception of reality. That's why Scooby is acting like this." Suddenly, the darkness seemed to deepen, becoming denser and more oppressive, swallowing the little light the flashlights offered. The flashlight beams began to flicker erratically, as if they were faulty or being affected by some invisible force. A low, deep murmur, like a distant roar coming from the very ground, echoed through the tunnels, making the walls vibrate and small stones fall from the ceiling with a muffled thud. A shadowy, shapeless form began to materialize at the end of the corridor, hovering in the air, pulsing with a faint, malevolent light. Its contours were fluid, changing shape with every blink like a nightmare materializing. But one thing was certain: two bright, malevolent yellow eyes fixed on them, full of malice and hunger. "Don't look directly," Fred warned, his voice firm, but he himself felt cold sweat run down his back. The figure was already defining itself, taking on a more recognizable, more terrifying form than any monster they had ever unmasked. It was Pennywise, the dancing clown, but not as a circus figure. His teeth were razor-sharp, long and pointed, and his smile was a terrifying slit in a white, makeup-covered face that seemed to crack and crumble. He extended a pale, gigantic hand with pointed nails towards Daphne, who was paralyzed with fear, her eyes fixed on the creature. Daphne screamed, but the scream was muffled by the clown's booming laughter, a laugh that seemed to come from every corner of the sewer, filling their ears and reverberating in their minds. "Look what we have here. New little friends to play with. And their fear is delicious. I can smell your dread. It's like perfume to me." The voice was a hoarse, menacing whisper, seeming to come from an unfathomable abyss, promising the deepest darkness. "Zoinks! It's him! The evil clown!" Shaggy yelled, and before Fred could stop them, he and Scooby, in total panic, turned and ran in the opposite direction, disappearing into the darkness of the secondary tunnels, their screams echoing and fading in the distance. Fred, Velma, and Daphne remained behind, confronting the apparition. Fred was tense, but his mind worked quickly. "It's not real," Velma insisted, her voice a little shaky, but still rational, trying to convince herself as much as her friends. "It's an illusion. It must be a projection to scare us, to make us flee and separate. We cannot give in to fear." The clown laughed, a laugh that seemed to spread through the walls, reverberating inside their heads as if it were within their deepest minds. Illusion? Oh dear. I am as real as your worst nightmare. I am your darkest imagination, materialized. And now, with your friends fleeing, you are alone, and your fear is my meal. It's what strengthens me. He began to levitate slowly towards them, his eyes fixed on Daphne's terrified expression, who was visibly shaken, but trying to compose herself. We have to do something. We can't let him get us. Daphne yelled, her voice full of panic, but her eyes, even with fear, began to search for an exit, a weak point, a distraction. She saw a loose metal grate on a side wall, almost imperceptible in the darkness, hidden behind a concrete pillar. It was a chance. A tiny chance, but it was the only one they had, and the adrenaline began to flow. Fred, quick-witted even under pressure, looked at the grate Daphne had pointed to, and then at Pennywise's distorted form approaching, his sharp teeth bared in a horrifying smile. Velma, Daphne, we need a trap. Now! I think I know exactly how to make him fall into it, but it's going to take good bait. And a lot of courage, more than we've had today, and maybe a little luck. Fred's determined gaze met Daphne's, and together, they knew the only way out was to face the clown, not flee, and the dairy's fate depended on them and Fred's next crazy idea. The piercing sound of Pennywise's laughter reverberated through the sewer tunnels, mixing with the distant screams of Scooby and Shaggy, which seemed to echo from some lost corner of the underground labyrinth, sounding more desperate with each passing second. With each laugh, the creatures seemed to grow in size and intensity, and the sweet, nauseating smell became almost unbearable, making them cough and their eyes water. Fred, Velma, and Daphne crouched behind a damp concrete pillar, watching the clown slowly float towards them, his distorted and menacing form, as if he were enjoying the flight of the two cowards, savoring their fear. "All right, gang, here's the plan," Fred whispered, his voice low and tense, but with the familiar spark of determination in his blue eyes that always appeared when he had a trap idea, even in the most desperate situations. He opened a small compartment of his toolkit, revealing a series of high-tech devices he always carried for emergencies, including a frequency meter and a small projector. "Velma, I need you to use this spectral energy meter to locate the point of greatest psychic energy concentration. Wherever it is, that's where the illusion is strongest, and that's where Pennywise is anchored, like a beacon of terror. We need your brain for this." Velma nodded, already fiddling with the device, which emitted a soft hum and an intermittent green light, her glasses sliding down her nose as she concentrated. "Understood, Fred. If he feeds on fear and negative energy, the convergence point of both must be the epicenter of his manifestation. It's like finding the source of a radio signal, but an evil radio signal that's transmitting directly into our minds. Daphne, you have the most crucial part," Fred continued, turning to her, his eyes serious and focused. "I need you to use your agility and grace to reach that elevated platform over there." He pointed to a slippery ledge about 3 meters above them, from which hung some loose, rusty, slime-covered cables. "Attach this electromagnetic net to the cables. It's activated by sound waves and can generate a containment force field, at least for a few seconds. It's our only chance to immobilize him, even for a brief moment." Daphne swallowed hard, looking at the height, the slippery surface, and the precarious cables, but her determination overcame her fear. "Electromagnetic net? Fred, that's a bit advanced, even for you. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, not a mystery chase." But a glint of defiance appeared in her eyes. "I can do it. I just need a distraction so he doesn't see me climbing and to give me time to attach everything correctly." "That's where the bait comes in," Fred said, a mischievous smile appearing on his face, despite the tense situation. "We're gonna lure him. Velma, I need you to prepare the holographic projector. We're going to create the worst vision he can imagine. A reunion of Scooby and Shaggy with an unlimited buffet of Scooby snacks. singing off-key lullabies about joy and lack of worry. Velma blinked, and then a smile of understanding spread across her face. Fred, that's brilliant. He'll be so horrified at the idea of not being able to feed on their fear, but rather on joy and abundance, that he'll approach to destroy the illusion. It's the opposite of what he expects, and that should emotionally destabilize him, if an entity like that even has emotions. Meanwhile, Scooby and Shaggy's screams grew louder and closer, indicating they were returning, probably having hit a dead end or simply being even more terrified by what they had seen and imagined. Zoinks! We're cornered! I swear I saw the clown coming from the other direction, and he was eating an entire balloon with an evil grin. Shaggy shrieked, his voice full of desperation and breathless, barely able to move. They stumbled out of the tunnel, eyes wide, and bumped into Fred, Velma, and Daphne, who were preparing the trap. Fred, the clown, he's behind us, and he's getting bigger. I think he ate a magic growth cake, and now he's a walking building. Shaggy shrieked again, pointing into the darkness behind them with a trembling hand. Perfect, Fred exclaimed, grabbing a backpack containing giant Scooby snacks, so large they looked like plates. Shaggy, Scooby, I need your help with something crucial. You two are the main bait, and the loudest. And please, try not to faint from fear until the plan works. He handed a box of giant Scooby snacks to Shaggy, which looked like small vinyl records. When I say so, throw these Scooby snacks at the clown and yell as loud as you can, "Snack time for everyone." That will draw his attention away from Daphne and the net, and he'll be confused by the offer of food. Shaggy and Scooby exchanged looks of dread, but also a strange determination. Snacks? For that monster? Fred, are you crazy? He'll eat us afterwards, instead of the snacks. Shaggy asked, but his fear of Fred seemed less than his dread of the clown. But if it's to save us. Okay. For the Scooby snack and for the salvation our hides. Scooby agreed, though with a tremor throughout his body and a look of resignation. Pennywise, hearing their return, slowly turned, his evil eyes fixing on the two friends, who seemed small and insignificant. Look at that. The cowards are back for the feast. How fun! And this time, I'll make sure they don't escape. Their fear is so sweet and tasty. The clown's figure began to contort, growing in size, taking on a more monstrous form, with long clawed arms that looked like sharp blades, and his mouth opened into an even more horrifying smile. Now, Freddy yelled, pointing his flashlight at the clown, which looked like the barrel of a gun. Snack time for everyone, and a talent show too. Shaggy and Scooby bellowed in unison, their voices seeming to crack with terror, throwing the giant Scooby snacks towards Pennywise with all their might. The snacks, to everyone's surprise, ricocheted off the creature with a hollow sound, as if they had hit metal, falling onto the damp ground with a dull thud. Pennywise stopped in midair, an expression of pure fury distorting his clown face, which seemed to contort into a mask of hatred and confusion. You ... to throw food at me? And offer me snacks? I am your destruction. I am fear incarnate. And you offer me snacks? This is an affront. A bad joke. The creature let out a roar of rage that made the walls vibrate and the ground tremble, the sweet, nauseating smell becoming almost unbearable, like a toxic gas corroding the air. While Pennywise's attention was focused on the snacks and the insult from Scooby and Shaggy, who began to hum an off-key children's song, Daphne, with impressive agility and unwavering focus, scaled the slippery wall, using the cracks and pipes as support. Her muscles were tense, but she climbed with the grace of a ballerina. She reached the platform, her quick fingers attaching the electromagnetic net's wires to the rusty cables, ignoring the slime and rust. "Velma, the projector," Fred instructed, his voice urgent. Velma activated the device, and an image of Scooby and Shaggy, giant and radiant, appeared floating in the air, surrounded by a mountain of Scooby snacks, with a giant red balloon written "Free Snack," and the phrase, "No fear, only snacks and happiness," pulsing in luminous letters. Pennywise's scream was deafening, a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the air and echo in their bones. He lunged towards the illusion, his eyes gleaming with insane rage, his form contorting into an amorphous mass of pure fury. "No, this is an abomination. I will destroy this happiness. This lack of fear. I will devour this image and turn it into a nightmare." He bellowed, his claws extended, ready to destroy the projection with blind fury. "Now, Daphne!" Fred yelled, his voice full of hope, watching the clown approach the illusion. Daphne, with a final effort, connected the last wire, her fingers trembling slightly. The electromagnetic net glowed with an intense blue light, activating with a loud hum, and began to form a transparent force field. But at the exact moment the force field was forming, Pennywise, in a surprising and rapid movement, unleashed a blast of psychic energy, an invisible wave that made the net flicker and fail with a loud crack. The force field dissolved into blue sparks and smoke, and the clown, with a victorious and malicious grin, passed through the area where the trap should have worked, laughing with disturbing joy. He wasn't caught. Fred, Velma, and Daphne looked at each other, shocked and disheartened. The trap had failed miserably. Pennywise was now closer, floating above them, his eyes fixed on their faces with a gleam of triumph and insatiable hunger. "It seems your little trap didn't work, did it? I am stronger than you imagine. I am fear itself. And now, what will you do? I am indestructible. I am what haunts you. I am the fear that lives and feeds in Derry." Pennywise's laughter echoed, filling the tunnel, and a feeling of despair began to take hold of the group. The plan had failed, and now they were more vulnerable than ever, with the clown approaching for the final attack, and their screams of dread seemed inevitable. Pennywise's insane laughter echoed through the sewers, and the trap's failure left Mystery Inc. in a state of bone-chilling shock and panic. The clown, growing in size and taking on even more grotesque forms, a gigantic spider with yellow eyes and thin, segmented legs, a werewolf with sharp teeth and bristling fur, a clown with a mouth full of needles and a smile stretching from ear to ear, hovered over them, reveling in the terror emanating from the group, almost savoring it in the air. The sweet, nauseating smell intensified, suffocating them and making their stomachs churn. "Zoinks! You didn't fall for it!" And now he's really angry, like super angry. Shaggy shrieked, clutching Scooby so tightly the dog could barely breathe, his eyes bulging with terror. "Now what, Fred? He's turning into a monster pizza with nightmare filling and fear topping." Fred, despite the frustration and the shiver running down his spine, didn't lose his composure. His eyes frantically scanned the surroundings, searching for a new solution, an opening, anything. He's made of fear. And if he didn't fall into the trap, it's because the trap didn't feed on his fear. He feeds on ours. We have to find a way to reverse this, to use his own fear against him. He looked at Velma, who was trying to readjust her spectral energy meter, which was now beeping frantically, showing inexplicable energy spikes. "Velma, you said he's timeless, and that the apparitions always have a red balloon. There has to be something about the balloons. They're the key." Velma, her brow furrowed in deep concentration, had an epiphany, her eyes widening behind her glasses, a spark of discovery emerging. Jinkies, that's it. The balloon. The balloon isn't just a sign. It's a part of him. It's an anchor, a conductor of his energy. It's like a focal point, the center of his manifestation, the knot from which everything originates. She pointed to a new red balloon that had just floated out of a side pipe closer to the clown and hovered above Pennywise's head, pulsing with a faint light and a sinister glow. "That balloon is radiating the highest concentration of spectral energy. It's the source of everything. It's what holds him together. Pennywise, distracted by their discussion and the pleasure of seeing the terror in their eyes, didn't notice that Daphne, with her agility and sharp survival instinct, was observing the balloon with unusual intensity. She remembered the high-pitched sound that had come from one of the balloons in Chapter 2, a hiss that had bothered her and which she had associated with electronic noise. An audacious, almost insane, idea began to form in her mind, connecting the dots. "Fred, Velma, look!" Daphne shouted, her voice strangely calm amidst the chaos, drawing their attention to the balloon. "The balloon! It's vibrating!" I remember the sound that came out of one of them before. A hiss ... a high-pitched noise. It reacted to sound. It's not a simple balloon. It's an amplifier. Pennywise turned, annoyed by the interruption of his fun. "Stop talking nonsense, meddling girl. You're just food for me. And now, the party's about to begin. I'll devour your fear until there's nothing left." He unleashed a blast of psychic energy that made the ground shake violently, dislodging large stones from the ceiling that fell near them with a terrifying crash. "This is our chance," Fred yelled, realizing Daphne's idea, and his eyes gleamed with new hope. "Shaggy, Scooby, you need to be brave now. We need a noise. The loudest, most annoying noise you can make. Think of something that would make a monster run under the bed in fear. Noise? But how?" "I can only scream in fear and cry," Shaggy asked, trembling so much his teeth chattered. "Think of something really annoying, Shaggy. Think of your aunt singing off-key opera while the neighbor plays bagpipes and the dog across the street barks at the full moon. All at the same time, loud and clear." Fred exclaimed, desperate, pointing at the balloon urgently. As Pennywise prepared to attack, his form contorting into an amorphous mass of teeth and glowing eyes, Scooby, with a flash of courage induced by desperation and the sight of Fred and Daphne in danger, saw the balloon hovering near Fred. He had an idea. He lunged towards Fred, grabbed Fred's measuring stick that was lying on the ground, a wooden stick Fred used to measure depths, made of dense wood, and, with all his strength, launched it towards the balloon, which was directly above the clown's head. The stick hit the balloon squarely with a surprising thwack, a dry, loud sound. Upon being punctured, the balloon didn't just pop. Instead, it released a sharp, high-pitched sonic noise, a sound that seemed to tear the air and vibrate in their bones, making their ears ring and their heads ache. It was a sound so disturbing and deafening that Pennywise, who was about to materialize in his most horrifying form, stopped abruptly. The clown let out a scream of pain, not of rage, but of agony, and began to writhe violently, his form liquid and distorted, as if melting under an intense light. The yellow eyes, previously full of malice, now showed panic and desperation. My hearing. This this hurts me. I can't bear it," Pennywise shrieked, recoiling, his voice distorted and weak. The sonic noise seemed to destabilize him, causing his form to disintegrate and recompose in a vicious cycle of failure, like a flickering hologram. The sweet, nauseating smell drastically diminished, replaced by a burning odor like overheated electrical wires. Velma, observing the effect, her eyes gleaming with understanding, exclaimed, "Jinkies! The balloon isn't just a conductor, it's a resonator. That organic elastic material absorbs and amplifies vibrations. The high-pitched sound destabilizes him because it's the opposite frequency to his own energy. This is our chance. Attack the balloons. They are his weak point." "Scooby, again!" Fred shouted, as the dog, sensing the effect, was already looking for more objects to throw. Shaggy, seeing the opportunity and overcoming his fear for an instant, a surprising act of courage, grabbed a can of spray paint from Fred's equipment and, with a shout of, "This is for my dirty pants and my fear of clowns," threw it towards another balloon that had just appeared. The can hit its target squarely, and another deafening sonic sound filled the air, making the tunnel shake and dust fall from the ceiling. Pennywise staggered, his form dissolving even further, like smoke dissipating in the wind. He let out one last scream of fury and pain, and in a flash of intense blue light, the clown's figure completely disintegrated, revealing ... a hologram. The projection flickered and vanished into the air, leaving behind only darkness and the residual sweet, nauseating smell, which now seemed only like the smell of industrial chemicals. What remained on the ground, where Pennywise had disappeared, was not a creature, but a complex machine, an advanced illusion projector, camouflaged by a layer of organic material that mimicked the sewer's texture and perfectly blended into the environment. In the center of the machine was a small drone, which emitted the balloon and the noises, controlling the projection. Next to it lay a man, unconscious and wearing a worn, somewhat comical clown costume that looked like it came from a bankrupt carnival. "Unmasked!" Fred exclaimed with a victorious smile, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. Velma knelt and began to eagerly examine the equipment, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. "I knew it. It wasn't a monster, but the technology that made it seem like one. This elastic material in the balloons was actually a pliable screen that unfolded and projected the holographic image of the clown, amplifying the sounds and even the sensations of fear. And the sonic noise, it interfered with the projection, causing the hologram to disintegrate. It's like a noise canceller for illusions, a trick that backfired on the magician." Daphne, recovered from the scare and with a sigh of relief, walked over to the unconscious man. "And our timeless clown is just ... a man in a costume with a lot of technology. He seemed so terrifying, but it was just a well-elaborated trick." She removed the man's mask, revealing a wrinkled and somewhat disappointed face, with a sparse beard and tired eyes, but now devoid of malice. "It's Mr. Abernathy, the caretaker of Derry's old cinema, the one who greeted us when we arrived and gave us information about the disappearances, acting like a helpful citizen." Scooby and Shaggy, still trembling, looked at the unconscious man and the machine with a mix of relief and confusion. So he wasn't a real monster? And I was screaming because of a movie projector and a crazy guy? Shaggy asked, still a bit pale, but already with a hungry glint in his eyes, thinking about the next snack. "No, Shaggy," Velma said with a smile. "Just a man who used technology to take advantage of people's fears and scare away anyone who tried to get close to his secrets. But we still need to find out what his secret was, and why he went to so much trouble to terrorize an entire town." She looked at the machine, the puzzle finally fitting together. The confrontation was over, and the truth behind Derry's clown was about to be revealed. Mr. Abernathy, the cinema caretaker, sat in a cold metal chair at the Derry police station, an expression of complete defeat on his face. His eyes, once filled with disguised malice and a cunning glint, now seemed empty, resigned, and even a little tired. Fred, Velma, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby were gathered in the interrogation room, observing the unfolding events with satisfaction, while a police officer scribbled notes on a notepad with a squeaky pen. The smell of strong coffee and old paper hung in the air. "So, Mr. Abernathy," Fred began, crossing his arms over his chest and leaning against the metal table, his voice firm and authoritative. "Now that the show's over and your creature has been unmasked, how about you tell us why you decided to dress up as a clown and terrorize Derry every 27 years? And what you were really looking for in the sewers, since there wasn't a monster there?" Mr. Abernathy sighed, a drawn-out, bitter sound that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, laden with frustration. "It's all because of that cursed cinema, and the gold." "Yes, the gold. I was a poor man, and the chance of a life of luxury was right under my nose, or rather, under the cinema." He gesticulated with his handcuffed hands, which clanged on the table with an irritating metallic sound. "Decades ago, the cinema's former owner, A real smuggler who used the place as a front hid a fortune in gold bars in the basement. But not in the sewers, as everyone thought. In the stormwater drainage system under the cinema, accessible only by a secret tunnel he dug, which I, by pure chance, discovered while doing plumbing repairs. I spent years looking for it, and finally found it, but I needed peace to retrieve it. Velma adjusted her glasses, her eyes gleaming with the confirmation of her theory, a victorious smile on her lips. And the disappearances every 27 years? The pattern one found in the historical records. That was all part of your plan to scare people away, wasn't it? Ah, that was brilliant, don't you think? Abernathy let out a bitter, raspy laugh, which was anything but funny, sounding more like the screech of rusty metal. This town is full of superstitions. People here believe any legend, as long as it's scary. I just needed to feed them. Every 27 years, I'd put on my horror show. I'd release some red balloons that seemed to float on their own, make some strange, spooky noises through the pipes with my drone, and let people tell their terror stories, amplifying the fear. The fear spread like wildfire. Nobody wanted to go near the sewers, much less the abandoned cinema, which was where I was working hard to remove the gold. I even kidnapped some children for a few hours, hid them in a secret compartment in the cinema, a hidden basement, and then released them, just to intensify the legend of Pennywise. They, naturally, were terrified and disoriented by my hallucinogenic gases, which were just a strong air freshener, but with a compound that causes disorientation, so their descriptions of the clown were incoherent, which helped me maintain the charade and protect myself from curious people and anyone who dared to investigate. Daphne shook her head, shocked by the man's coldness and cruelty, using children's fear for his own benefit. And the toys in the sewer? And the sweet, nauseating smell? The toys? Oh, that was to add a more dramatic touch, of course. To make it seem like he was feeding on the children or taking them to a lair. I stole them from some abandoned attics and threw them there on purpose. And the sweet smell. That was just a long-lasting air freshener with a hint of sulfur and an artificial cherry scent, which I injected into the pipes. I wanted fear to have an unforgettable smell, something that would be etched in people's minds, associated with horror, Abernathy revealed with a smug smile, as if proud of his ruse. And the clown's illusions, the holographic projection, the sonic noise coming from the balloons, which, as you well noted, were made of a special material that amplified the sound. All of that was the icing on the cake for the legend. No one ever would suspect a simple cinema caretaker, right? I was the last to be suspected, the most harmless person in town. Fred nodded with a satisfied smile, but also a look of disapproval. Until you underestimated the power of a good group of detectives. And a dog that likes to pop balloons and a friend who sings opera. Your plans, Mr. Abernathy, were complex, but greed always leaves a clue, doesn't it? Scooby, hearing his name, let out a satisfied bark, and Shaggy gave him a giant Scooby snack, which he devoured in one bite. You were the hero, Scooby. Your stick throw ended the crazy clown's party. Who knew a balloon would be a holographic monster's weak point? Ruh-roh. Scooby chuckled, happy, wiping cracker crumbs from his mouth. What annoyed me most was having to put up with your insufferable singing on the police jeep's radio to make noise. Abernathy grumbled, pointing at Shaggy, who shrugged with a grin. Now that is a monster. It gave me more of a headache than anything else. My ears are still ringing. Shaggy blushed, but then shrugged with a proud smile. Hey, you asked for an annoying noise, and my garage opera is a showstopper. It's my hidden talent, and it seems it was useful for a change. Velma, with a satisfied smile, said, The clues always fit together when you analyze them correctly. The 27-year pattern was the frequency with which Mr. Abernathy needed time to search for the gold and clear the path, ensuring no one bothered him. The balloons, the smell, the visions. Everything served to scare away curious people and keep the legend alive. He was using local folklore to protect his smuggling and illicit enrichment scheme, exploiting people's fear. Daphne, with a nod, completed. And the only thing he didn't count on was that his real fear was being unmasked, and that the vulnerability of his illusion was the very balloon that projected it. He created his own downfall, Mr. Abernathy, by underestimating intelligence and courage, even if accompanied by a lot of fear and snacks. As Mr. Abernathy was led away by the police, handcuffed and with his head bowed, he uttered one last sentence, with a look of resignation and a touch of frustration that bordered on comical. "I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for these meddling kids, and that dog, and the girl with the headband. Curse it." Fred laughed as the gang headed for the Mystery Machine, which was already clean and ready for the road, with the sun finally appearing through the clouds, illuminating the town. Another mystery solved, gang. And the gold, of course, will be returned to its rightful heirs, or used for the good of Derry, to compensate for all the fear it went through. Shaggy and Scooby hopped into the van, already opening more packs of Scooby snacks and planning their next meal, their stomachs rumbling in unison. "Next time, can we go somewhere where the monsters taste like pizza and not sewage, Fred? And don't smell like spoiled cotton candy mixed with metal?" Shaggy asked with a mouthful. "Yeah, pizza, and no clowns." Scooby agreed, wagging his tail enthusiastically, already forgetting the recent terror. Daphne smiled, looking at the road ahead, which opened up to the daylight. "Who knows, Shaggy? The world is big and full of mysteries, and snacks. But for now, Derry is safe. And who knows, maybe in 27 years, a new mystery will call us back. Or maybe a giant snack will call us sooner. Who knows?" She winked, and the Mystery Machine sped down the road, leaving behind the secrets and fears of Derry's sewers in search of a new adventure. And who knows, a new and delicious mystery to unravel, with lots of laughter and, of course, plenty of Scooby snacks to celebrate another victory.